saying, is it enough? No. The president described Israel as bombing, indiscriminate bombing in December. 7 months have passed and you have paused one arms shipment, as I understand it. Is that fair?
I'll state it for you again. We want to make sure Israel has a right to defend itself from the kinds of attacks it suffered on the 7th of October, which I know is easy for people to forget. 1,200 people slaughtered, most at a music festival. Number two, that Israel's doing everything they can to protect innocent civilian life. Is it enough? No. They need to continue to do more. And that we are doing everything we can to give humanitarian assistance into the people of Gaza. That's our Gaza policy.
Thank you, Karine. Two questions on the Middle East. Israel has conducted the largest seizure of land in the West Bank, which undermines the president's vision for two-state solution. So why the White House has been mum on that, and will the president...
Yeah, no, it's not that we've been...
Thanks, John. You mentioned the context of this summit this week. It's also the first time the president interacted with these world leaders since that the disastrous debate against former President Trump 10 days or so ago, where the president struggled to confront the former president on all sorts of things. What is the president's, does the president feel how does he plan to reassure American allies in NATO that he's up for the job now when he couldn't confront Trump on stage then?
I think the question presupposes the notion that they need to be reassured of American leadership and President Biden's commitment, and I don't believe that's the case. We're not picking up any signs of that from our allies at all, quite the contrary. The conversations that we're having with them in advance, they're excited about this summit, they're excited about the possibilities and the things that we're going to be doing together, specifically to help Ukraine.
So you've seen zero, I mean, there have been stories in multiple outlets on both sides of the Atlantic over the last several days with questions from European leaders about the president's capacity to lead the United States. Are you just denying that? I'm
not aware of any such conversations that have been had, certainly none with us and here at the White House and with our staff. We're looking forward to it. I want to go back to what I said at the beginning. In the last 3 years, rather than browbeaten and insulting and demeaning allies, this president has invested in allies and partnerships. And when he took office, what I said, only nine allies had reached the 2% level. Now 23. That's not by accident. That's because of leadership. That's because of constant stewardship of the alliance and other partnerships around the world. The president's record speaks for itself, and the allies and the non-NATO friends and partners that are coming as well, they know that. They wouldn't be coming. New Zealand, Japan, South Korea, to a NATO summit if they didn't believe in American leadership and how important it is, and if they didn't believe that President Biden takes that responsibility extremely seriously.
Admiral, good to see you. On the point about European countries, NATO members boosting their defense spending, that was something, though, that was a big concern of the last president. It's part of the reason many of them are boosting their funding.
And it was a concern of the president before the last president. As you recall, President Obama said the same thing. This pledge goes back a decade or so. But the numbers speak for themselves, Ed. I mean, rather than browbeating and yelling and screaming and complaining and whining about it, President Biden invested in this alliance. And just the last 3.5 years now, more than double the number of allies have reached that 2%.
Two questions on the fallout from the debate. Have you, in your meetings with him, ever seen him appear similarly to the way he did on debate night?
Look, I'm a spokesman.
And you're in a lot of meetings with him.
I am. The last thing I'm going to do is sit here and talk about every meeting I've had with the president. What I can tell you is, what I saw in that debate is not reflective of the man and the leader and the commander-in-chief that I have spent many, many hours with over the last 2.5 years in terms of the specificity of the way he probes, the questions he asks. Heck, just this morning, he was asking me questions about the situation on the European continent that I couldn't answer, and I told him I had to get back to him.
When he met with governors last week, he suggested he'd like to curtail events that begin after 8 p.m. at night, just because he'd rather focus on resting and doesn't want to have a long day. In your understanding of things, has the National Security Council ever withheld information from him he should have known late at night out of concern he might not be able to process it?
No.
Russia has bombed Ukraine's largest children's hospital, as you noted. Do you believe the timing of these strikes is meant to send a message to NATO ahead of this week's summit?
It's hard to draw a line, Mary, to that. I mean, Sadly, this is par for the course for Mr. Putin to hit civilian infrastructure, and he doesn't care whether he's hitting hospitals or residential buildings. I can't draw the line that this is some sort of message. But look, I mean, as I said, what you're going to see over the course of the week is a very set of strong signals and messages to Mr. Putin that he can't wait NATO out, can't wait the United States out, that we're going to continue to support Ukraine.
I'm sorry. Oh, okay. I just wanted to ask about the air defenses and some of the sort of deliverables that are coming out of the NATO summit. Can you walk us through what you think will be happening in terms of any additional commitments in addition to the funding packages that have come? And can you say a few words about this project to sort of consolidate the way that weapons are going to Ukraine through the distribution center that I think there's a center that'll be set up in Wiesbaden under coordination.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. The purpose for me to come today was just kind of give you the laydown of the summit ahead, and not to get too far ahead of the leaders and the specific deliverables. But so without doing that and without getting fired, I'll just tell you that you're going to see some announcements on air defense. You're going to see some announcements on deterrence capabilities, not just with respect to helping Ukraine, but boosting the alliance. You're going to see some announcements with respect to the defense industrial base and how to shore up that and make it more resilient and invest it more, including in our own industrial base here in the United States. And you're going to see, as I alluded to, some discussion about Ukraine's path to NATO and what that can look like, and a reaffirmation of what the president has long said, that NATO is in Ukraine's future.
Just to follow up on that, can you say whether the word irreversible will be in the communique?
I'm not going to get ahead of the specific language one way or the other.
And then just on Israel and Gaza, can you say anything about the Israeli response to the Hamas response to the ceasefire proposal? Lots of responses.
Yeah, so no surprise to y'all, I'm not going to negotiate here from the podium in public. I would just tell you that there has been some back and forth. As you know, we have a team in Cairo right now that includes Brett McGurk and the director of the CIA. They're meeting with their Egyptian, Israeli, and Jordanian counterparts, and there'll be follow-on discussions after that over the next few days. Look, we've been working this very, very hard, and there are still some gaps that remain in the two sides and the positions. But we wouldn't have sent a team over there if we didn't think that we had a shot here. And we're going to take every shot we can to see if we can't get this ceasefire deal in place.
Within days?
I couldn't give you a date certain.
Good, David.
Thank you. John, thanks for doing this. First, just to follow up on the communique, even if you can't get into irreversible, the president's objection last year and Chancellor Schultz's objection, if I remember Vilnius correctly, was that neither one of them wanted a date set for fear, I assume, that the United States and its allies would be drawn into the ground war if Ukraine was still at war while a NATO member. Does that remain today to be his primary objection? Is he willing to do wording that just is short of a date? Because even if you do the word irreversible or not, it doesn't really change the meaning very much of what you published in Vilnius. And I have a second on just the level of...
Look, I'll make this simple but unsatisfying. Again, I'm not going to get into the text and the discussions about what the draft's going to look like, David. I think you can understand that. But I do think your question is important to provide some context to. The president still believes that NATO is in Ukraine's future. What that future looks like depends on an awful lot of factors. Right now, you got a war going on inside Ukraine, and the focus rightly's got to be on helping them win that war. And we are, as I detailed in my opening statement. Number two, for any country that wants to join NATO, any country, and it's an alliance of democracies, the democracies have to meet certain guidelines, particularly when it comes to governance. And we are and will continue to work with Ukraine on reforms that are necessary for any democracy that wants to be a member of NATO. And then the third thing I'd say is, you know, it's a unanimous vote. Everybody has to be on board with that, and that can take some time as well. So the focus is on making sure that they can win now, and that we can continue to work with Ukraine so that there is a path to NATO. The last thing I'd say is back to the bilateral security agreement that the president signed with President Zelensky at the G7 in Italy. I mean, we're one of many other nations that have done that too, because we know that whenever this war ends, however it ends, and whatever the border looks like, Ukraine's still going to have a long border with Russia that's going to need to be defended, and they're going to need the reassurance of being able to put forth a capable and competent defensive capability against Russian forces going forward, and that's why we're making sure that there are things in line to make sure that Ukraine can defend itself.
One follow-up on that. You mentioned that it was 10 years ago that the 2% GDP goal was set. Obviously, there was no war underway at that time, and so the entire security situation looks radically different than it did when that was set.
Well, I beg to differ. There was fighting in Afghanistan, and Mr. Putin invaded Ukraine in 2014.
Yeah. But I think the 2% may have been set.
It was in Wales. It might have been set before the invasion, but nevertheless, it was still a tense security environment.
Right. We're in something much different today. I think we're all in agreement, just given the amount of arms
No argument
going in. So, is part of the president's message at this summit that 2% is in the rearview mirror, that the NATO allies are going to have to be spending significantly more than that, maybe double that, for some countries, some larger economies? Or is he going to stay away from numbers? I know it's politically sensitive with all of them. You mentioned the word win. I was wondering how you're defining that.
Okay, there's a lot there. The president's not going to set a new bar or a new level of GDP spending on defense here at this summit. The goal is 2%. It was a commitment everybody made 10 years ago. Not everybody's there. Most of the remaining nations that haven't reached 2%, most of them, not all, are working on it and are getting there. And so I think the president wants, to focus on that. Wants to laud and commemorate those who have, but also make it clear that those who haven't still have some work to do. On win, I think we've been consistent about this. I mean, at least I think I have. I mean, we want all of Ukraine's sovereign territory respected, which means we want no Russian forces in any part of Ukraine by the internationally recognized boundaries.
John, you just said, answering a question to Zeke, you're not picking up on signs of allies needing reassurances when it comes to President Biden. But the allies also look for a secure United States. Have you heard any conversations from the allies about issues of the elections process here, what they've been seeing, and the stability of the United States in the next few months, couple of years, etc.?
I'm not aware of any specific conversations with respect to our domestic political situation. But look, April, we watch the domestic political situation of our allies and partners, of course, like we did with the UK and with France over the weekend, and we have no doubt that they're watching ours as well, and that they'll be watching our election with a lot of keen interest. We certainly would expect that. But I'm not aware of any conversations that we've had at senior levels here, at the NSC or elsewhere at the White House, from allies specifically about this particular election.
The European Union who gathered reporters a couple of years ago with concerns about democracy here?
They might be talking to y'all, but I'm not aware of any specific conversations here.
Just want to circle back, Admiral, on Ed's question. So you said broadly that the president, in your view, is not represented by what was on the debate stage. Then you gave us an anecdote about a meeting today where he was engaged and so forth. Are you saying you have never encountered a situation where you thought that he was displaying any of those symptoms or affectations or something that would give pause, or are you just declining to answer one way or another?
Well, I'm a little uncomfortable answering these kinds of questions because as a spokesman, my job is to be an advisor and counselor, and I don't think it's appropriate for
But you gave
a
us a
spokesman
positive.
to.
You gave us a
Yeah, I did
positive.
because I wanted to make it clear. So yes, I'm uncomfortable with these kinds of questions, but to answer your specific question, in my experience, the last 2.5 years, I have not seen any reason whatsoever to question or doubt his lucidity, his grasp of context, his probing nature, and the degree to which he is completely in charge of facts and figures. And if he isn't, what I've seen is, because it happened to me this morning, when he isn't and when I can't be in command of those facts and figures, I have to fess up and go get the information that he's asking for. And he asked me some questions this morning I didn't have answers for.
Okay, Nadia. Thank you, Karine. Two questions on the Middle East. Israel has conducted the largest seizure of land in the West Bank, which undermines the president's vision for two-state solution. So why the White House has been not mum on that, and will the president...
Yeah, no, it's not that we've been mum. There was a statement put out by the State Department about this call for settlements. Nothing's changed about our view that settlements continue to be counterproductive to peace and stability and the possibility of a two-state solution. We don't support that.
Okay, and second, you mentioned about the Ukraine and Russia in terms of the civilian casualties. The UN said today that actually half of the facilities of UNRWA has been hit, and 520 people have been killed in addition to the aid workers. So do you still believe that Israel is doing what it takes to protect civilian lives, including women and children?
We certainly believe that they need to continue to do more to protect innocent civilian life.
Not doing much. I mean, I've been asking this question for 9 months.
Your question wasn't about what they're doing or not doing. Your question was, do we believe that they should do more? And my answer is yes, well, they need to do more to protect civilian life. And we're going to continue to have conversations with them about how they're prosecuting these operations.
Thanks, John. Just sticking with the Middle East, but connecting it to the other big story. During the ABC News interview on Friday, George Stephanopoulos asked the president, was he, quote, the same man today that you were when you took office 3.5 years ago? And the president's reply began, in terms of successes, yes, I was also the guy who put together a peace plan for the Middle East that may be coming to fruition. Now, it may or may not be coming to fruition, we don't know. We do know 38,000 people have been killed in Gaza, almost 2 million displaced, and according to UNICEF, 1 in 3 children under the age of 2 is suffering from acute malnutrition. Does the president consider his Gaza policy a success?
The president believes wholeheartedly that this ceasefire proposal that we are trying to get done will make a big difference in terms of not only temporarily ceasing hostilities, but potentially giving us an opening to end this conflict. It's important to remember how this started, and you talked about our Gaza policy. I'll state it for you again. We want to make sure Israel has a right to defend itself from the kinds of attacks it suffered on the 7th of October, which I know is easy for people to forget. 1,200 people slaughtered, most at a music festival. Number 2, that Israel's doing everything they can to protect innocent civilian life. Is it enough? No. They need to continue to do more. And that we are doing everything we can to give humanitarian assistance into the people of Gaza. That's our Gaza policy. And as the president has also said, we would be and will still continue to be willing to adjust the policies that we are executing with respect to Gaza as we see things unfold on the ground.
But the broader question was, does he consider his policy to have been successful?
Israel is defending itself against a terrorist attack, so we can check that off. Humanitarian assistance continues to flow. In fact, if it wasn't for the United States, I dare say that not a fraction of the humanitarian assistance that is getting into Gaza would get in. Is it enough? No. And the Israelis have taken some steps to be more precise, more discriminate, and more careful in their operations. Is it enough? No. So we're going to keep at it. We're going to keep working on this.
Is it enough? No. The president described Israel as bombing, indiscriminate bombing in December. 7 months have passed and you have paused 1 arms shipment, as I understand. Is that fair?
That's right. Is there a question here?
Do you think that that's an effective response to indiscriminate bombing of a civilian population?
It's never right to be conducting indiscriminate bombing of a civilian population. That's why we continue to work with the Israelis to be more precise, to be more careful.
All right, just a couple more. Go ahead, Michael.
Hi, Admiral. Can I just start with the Middle East as well? Hamas has accused Netanyahu of putting obstacles in the way of the ceasefire deal that is being talked about now. Does the US think that Netanyahu's government is doing everything it can to secure the ceasefire deal?
We're working hard to get that ceasefire deal in place. I'm not going to negotiate here in public or talk about who's saying what and who's doing what. We have seen both sides now, as Andrea rightly asked in her question. We've seen both sides come out with some public statements with respect to the text. The last thing I'm going to do is get into bartering here. We're trying to close those gaps as best we can. We wouldn't have sent the CIA director or Brett McGurk to Cairo if we didn't believe it was worth a shot and worth a chance. I would also add that on both sides, you see public comments that aren't necessarily fully reflective of the conversations that we're having with, privately with them or their interlocutors.